The automotive world was rocked when AutoNation dropped its latest Q3 2025 results, and the numbers are sending shockwaves through the entire car industry. Revenue surged to $704 billion, up 7% year-over-year, and adjusted earnings per share, EPS, smashed expectations at 5.01, beating forecasts. What's going on under the hood? Let's dig in. First, new vehicle sales are climbing, with total store unit sales up across every segment: domestic, import, and premium. Hybrid and electric vehicles are leading the charge. Hybrid volume rose sharply, and battery electric vehicles, BEVs, jumped nearly 40% compared to last year. Used cars? Also showing strength. Used retail unit sales improved 6% year-over-year, with stable prices and profitability per unit remaining firm. AutoNation's finance arm is surging too. Originations have skyrocketed, reflecting stronger credit performance and rising demand for customer loans. And it's a significant but, there's a twist. Profit per new vehicle slipped. The average gross profit per new vehicle fell to around $290, down from previous quarters, dragged largely by soft margins on EVs and tighter pricing pressure across the board. That's a warning sign even as volume climbs. So what does this mean for the rest of the industry? Auto dealers everywhere are watching, because AutoNation's move shows that even when demand is there, shifting consumer habits, rising EV share, tighter margins, and evolving supply chain dynamics can shake up the traditional profit model. The big question now: can AutoNation and the industry keep riding this wave? Will increased EV adoption offset shrinking per-unit profits? Will used car and financing segments carry the growth forward? Or will pricing pressure bite back harder as competition heats up? And that brings us to the next big shift happening in real time. The power balance inside the car industry is changing faster than anyone expected. AutoNation's latest numbers aren't just a company update. They're a live snapshot of how American consumers are behaving in this new market cycle. People aren't buying cars the way they used to. They're smarter, more selective, more payment-focused, and more sensitive to interest rates. That's why AutoNation's financing surge matters so much. It signals that buyers are returning, but they're leaning heavily on better loan structures and competitive rate programs instead of simply walking in with cash like they did during the post-pandemic boom. Meanwhile, dealerships across the country are quietly studying AutoNation's strategy. Why? Because the company's rapid shift toward hybrid and EV inventory is a clear sign that demand is stabilizing in this segment. Not exploding, not collapsing, but finding a steady, profitable lane. This is forcing every automaker and dealer network to rethink allocation. Fewer slow-moving trims, more hybrid-focused stock, smarter pricing on EVs, and tighter control of used car acquisition. The industry is shifting from volume chasing to precision tuning, and AutoNation just proved how high the stakes are. Even automakers are being pushed into a new corner by these trends. If more dealers follow AutoNation's model of balancing high-turn used vehicles with targeted EV and hybrid inventory, it could force manufacturers to rethink their 2026-2027 production forecasts. Too much EV inventory could crush margins. Too little could hand market share to competitors overnight. And every brand, from Ford to Toyota to GM to Tesla, is watching this data closely, because AutoNation's performance acts like an early economic indicator for the entire automotive pipeline. But the real shocker is the emerging pattern behind the scenes. Service and after-sales are rising as the hidden profit engine. AutoNation's service growth and fixed operations strength suggest that American car owners are holding onto their vehicles longer, delaying big purchases, and investing more into maintenance. That shift alone could reshape dealer profitability for the next decade. If service becomes the backbone of the business, automakers will have to prioritize reliability, parts availability, and long-term ownership value in a way they haven't since the early 2000s. And now, the question hovering over the entire market is simple but massive. Is AutoNation's Q3 data the beginning of a new industry cycle, or the final warning before the next big reset? Because if these trends keep accelerating, The market won't just adjust, it will transform at every level. Inventory strategy, pricing power, EV rollout pacing, service operations, and even dealership staffing models. And that leads us directly into the next major shift happening under the surface, one that most analysts still haven't fully recognized: the collapse of old dealership economics and the rise of data-driven retailing. AutoNation's latest numbers aren't just showing what they sold, they're revealing how they sold it. And that's the part quietly shaking the industry. Traditional dealerships used to rely on foot traffic, weekend deals, and broad inventory. But AutoNation is proving that the future belongs to those who master predictive analytics, targeted inventory allocation, and digital-first customer acquisition. Right now, over half of their buyers initiate their purchase online. Not by walking into a store, not by browsing the lot, but by making a decision before they even meet a salesperson. And that flips the entire dealership model upside down. When customers make decisions digitally, the dealership with the strongest data pipeline wins, not the one with the biggest showroom. Inventory becomes a chess game. Pricing becomes algorithmic. Sales become more predictable and more profitable when you know exactly what customers want before they start searching. This shift is forcing every other dealer group to adapt or fall behind. Smaller dealerships, regional networks, and legacy family-owned stores now face a new kind of pressure. Compete with this level of data precision or watch market share evaporate. Because if AutoNation can see which trims, colors, and powertrains will sell fastest in each region weeks in advance, they can price more aggressively, stock more efficiently, and move vehicles quicker than anyone else. That kind of advantage doesn't just increase revenue, it reshapes the competitive landscape. At the same time, automakers are paying close attention because this level of real-time data affects the entire production chain. If AutoNation flags that hybrid SUVs are turning quicker in coastal states, manufacturers shift allocations. If EV margins drop further, automakers tweak their incentives. If used car demand rises, production planning adjusts for the next model year. AutoNation's data doesn't just reflect the market, it redirects it. And here's the part causing the most tension behind closed doors: AutoNation's influence over pricing. With their scale, they're now able to normalize national price expectations. If they drop prices on certain models, competitor dealers feel pressure instantly. If they hold strong margins on EVs, others follow suit. They are no longer just reacting to market conditions, they're steering them. But the biggest ripple effect is still building, and it's coming from a place almost nobody expects: the integration of service, financing, and digital retail into a single ecosystem that could redefine how Americans buy cars forever. Because once those components merge into a seamless data-powered loop, the entire industry's old playbook becomes obsolete. And this is exactly where the next major disruption is already forming: a shift so significant that even major automakers are quietly preparing for it. A shift so significant that even major automakers are quietly preparing for it, because the next phase of the automotive marketplace won't be driven by vehicles alone. It will be driven by ecosystem control. AutoNation's latest strategy hints at something far bigger than dealership profits or quarterly earnings. They are building a full-cycle ownership loop where the customer never leaves their ecosystem, from the moment they browse a car online to the day they upgrade it years later. Here's how deep this goes. When AutoNation controls the sale, the financing, the service, the trade-in, and even the reconditioning of that trade-in for resale, they're effectively controlling the life cycle of the vehicle. And that's a power automakers never expected dealers to gain at this scale. It means AutoNation is starting to influence not just what people buy, but how long they keep it, when they upgrade, and which model they switch to next. For manufacturers, that's both an opportunity and a threat. If AutoNation's ecosystem pulls consumers in, automakers will need to negotiate differently. Incentives will shift. Marketing will change. Loyalty programs will evolve. The battle won't be about who builds the best car. It will be about who controls the customer journey. And right now, AutoNation is positioning itself as the gatekeeper of that journey. Meanwhile, the ripple effects are hitting the used car market even harder. AutoNation's growing ability to buy, recondition, and resell trade-ins at scale gives them leverage that smaller operations could only dream of. With stronger service pipelines feeding their used inventory and better data predicting which vehicles will move fastest, they're slowly tightening their grip on both sides of the market. Inventory comes in through their service lanes, and it goes out through their digital retail platform. That loop is dangerous for competitors because it creates a self-sustaining engine of profitability nobody can easily replicate. And here's the part industry insiders are whispering about. If AutoNation continues expanding this integrated ecosystem, they could become the single most influential retail force shaping EV adoption rates in the US. Their data can forecast regional EV demand before automakers finalize production. Their financing arm can influence how buyers choose between hybrid and full electric. Their service network can determine how profitable long-term EV ownership becomes. Control the data, control the ecosystem, and you eventually control the consumer shift. But the story gets even bigger, because AutoNation's next move appears to be aimed at a market segment that could turn the entire industry on its head. The battle for mid-priced, fast-turn inventory. The exact segment automakers have been struggling to stabilize since 2021. For years, brands have been drifting toward higher-priced trims and luxury packages to preserve margins. But AutoNation's latest trendline reveals something automakers didn't want to hear. The real demand in America is shifting back toward practical, affordable, efficiency-focused models. This shift is massive because it calls out a flaw in the industry's current strategy. While automakers chase premium pricing, AutoNation's data shows that customers are returning to budget-conscious decision-making, especially in the compact SUV and mid-size sedan segments. These aren't glamorous vehicles, but they're the ones moving fastest off the lots. And when the largest automotive retailer in the country identifies this pivot, it forces manufacturers to rethink everything from production planning to pricing to incentive design. AutoNation is using its scale to capitalize on this trend faster than anyone else. They're targeting high-velocity models, balancing inventory with surgical precision, and turning cars in days instead of weeks. That speed gives them leverage that translates directly into stronger negotiating power. Automakers want their vehicles on lots where they move quickly, and AutoNation is becoming the marketplace where the fastest turnaround happens. That dynamic begins to shift influence upstream, placing AutoNation in a position where they can subtly shape which models receive priority production and which ones get pushed to the back of the line. But the real shockwave comes from how AutoNation is pairing this strategy with their rapidly growing aftermarket and subscription services. Extended warranties, maintenance bundles, EV service plans, digital connectivity packages. These offerings sound small, but they're forming a new revenue backbone that keeps customers locked into the AutoNation orbit long after the initial sale. In an era where margins on new vehicles are tightening, this recurring revenue model is becoming a lifeline. And AutoNation is scaling it faster than almost anyone expected. Even more surprising is how their data suggests a looming shift in customer preferences around ownership. Younger buyers aren't just looking for cars. They're looking for flexibility, predictable costs, and long-term security. AutoNation is quietly building products that meet those expectations before many automakers even acknowledge the trend. That means the next generation of car buyers may form their brand loyalty with the retailer, not the manufacturer. And this is exactly where the industry starts to feel the pressure, because if AutoNation becomes the primary touchpoint for customer loyalty, they effectively become the new power center of the automotive world. Automakers still build the vehicles, but AutoNation shapes the demand, controls the experience, and owns the data. And now, their next strategic expansion appears to be aimed at an area that could disrupt automakers more than anything so far. And now their next strategic expansion appears to be aimed at an area that could disrupt automakers more than anything so far. The consolidation of mobility services under a single retail umbrella. This isn't just about selling cars anymore. It's about controlling how people move, how they pay, how they upgrade, and how they stay connected across their entire ownership journey. AutoNation is positioning itself not just as a retailer, but as a mobility infrastructure hub. And that shift could fundamentally change the balance of power in the automotive landscape. For years, automakers believed they would be the ones to dominate new mobility models like subscription cars, short-term leases, fleet services, and lifestyle-based ownership packages. But AutoNation is quietly building the framework faster than the manufacturers, using its national footprint and massive customer base to scale programs that offer flexibility far beyond traditional financing. Imagine a world where a customer can switch between a hybrid SUV, an EV commuter car, and a weekend sports model, all within the AutoNation ecosystem, without ever renegotiating a full loan or lease. That's the kind of model AutoNation is already testing behind the scenes. What makes this so disruptive is that it aligns perfectly with what modern consumers want: less commitment, more convenience, more control, and predictable costs. AutoNation can offer that faster and with less friction than large automakers, because they control the point of sale, the service pipeline, the used car inventory, and the data that connects all of it together. When you control the life cycle of a vehicle, you can turn ownership into a service. And when you turn ownership into a service, you change the entire definition of a customer. Meanwhile, automakers are watching with increasing concern. A subscription-driven marketplace threatens the traditional dealership pipeline, disrupts their incentive structures, and reshapes demand forecasting. If customers stop buying long-term and start rotating through vehicles more frequently, automakers will need to rethink production cycles, trim strategies, and supply chain pacing. And if AutoNation becomes the platform through which these decisions flow, manufacturers could lose a huge amount of control over how their vehicles gain traction in the market. But the most surprising part, the part almost nobody outside industry boardrooms has noticed, is how AutoNation is preparing its infrastructure to support an entirely new breed of EV and hybrid buyers. These customers demand faster turnaround service, smarter charging support, better warranty clarity, and long-term battery management solutions. AutoNation isn't waiting for automakers to fill these gaps. They're building their own EV-capable service bays, installing proprietary diagnostic tools, and rolling out specialized EV maintenance programs that deepen customer dependence on their ecosystem. And that's where the real ripple effect begins. Because once AutoNation controls the EV ownership experience, they gain leverage over the segment that automakers are betting their entire future on. Whoever owns EV service and customer retention owns the next decade of automotive profits. And AutoNation is quietly positioning itself to become that gatekeeper. But the industry disruption doesn't stop there, because all signs point to AutoNation preparing for an even larger move, one that could extend its influence far beyond traditional dealerships and into a part of the market automakers hoped would remain off-limits. And as all these shifts collide, from data-driven retailing to ecosystem control, from EV service dominance to mobility subscriptions, one thing becomes crystal clear. AutoNation isn't just reacting to the future of the car market, they're defining it. Every move they make sends a tremor through automaker boardrooms, dealership networks, and market analysts who now realize the landscape is changing faster than anyone expected. The companies that adapt will rise. The ones that hesitate will get left behind. Because in this new era of automotive power, information is leverage, speed is everything, and control over the customer journey is the ultimate advantage. So stay tuned, because what AutoNation is building right now could become the blueprint for the entire industry, or the earthquake that forces every competitor to reinvent themselves from the ground up. And trust me, the next chapter of this shakeup is coming sooner than anyone thinks.